The penultimate rankings in the college football playoff are out, and they might look a lot like the ultimate one. This is the College Game Day podcast. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel with you. So no surprise at the top, Pete, with Oregon remaining number one. The Ducks, the only undefeated team in college football. Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame just behind. Notre Dame ranked fourth, can be seated no higher than fifth. But the real drama came at the end of the rankings, at least in terms of who would make the bracket. And the last team in the field, according to the rankings right now, is Alabama. College Football Playoff Selection Committee ranking the Crimson Tide just ahead of Miami, followed by Ole Miss and South Carolina. Now, this is going to cause some consternation. My thought on those four teams is that all of them have proven they can lose. We know that. All of them have proven that they can stumble. So what did you do well? And differing opinions and differing judgments will come from that. But Ward Manuel said to me on the College Football Playoff Top 25 selection show that given the fact that none of those teams in that cluster are playing, that order is set, that there's not a situation where you have a couple of committee members who are going to mull it over for another week and might change their minds.
That was huge, by the way. That was like a bombshell. Yeah.
I mean, I even at one point said to him, Pete, I want to clarify, make sure you understand what I'm asking you here. Yeah. And he stated it when I assume you were surprised as I was by that.
I was, Rece, because first of all, it cuts out a bunch of the drama for next week, right? Like the notion of, and again, I think that's probably the right thing to do philosophically and from an execution standpoint, right? Like you can't just magically jump up if there are really no results, that if you're not playing and there's no results that will impact how you play. So I appreciated the transparency and the clarity.
Me too.
Yeah, I just thought it just it might hurt ratings next week, but I really think that there will be still drama. Don't get me wrong. It's just like the array of drama, like the potential of wider drama has been eliminated. But I do think the conviction that he and the committee showed with that narrows our focus here, and there are still some variables that can happen, and still some fun that will occur, but and the chance for some mischief, I think, too. But it really just pits the SEC versus the ACC a little bit, right? And the ACC title game has huge stakes, and I think he made pretty clear from what he said to you, and then the transcript I read from his call with the print media. Showed that SMU, not only needs to, if they win, they better not get blown out. Like they're not assured of anything. That was my takeaway, Rece.
I agree. They have a bit of a buffer there, Pete. But I do think you're right. Getting blown out, which I don't anticipate. But if they do, it certainly creates some drama. And it's much like when we were talking about the Indiana-Ohio State game back in the regular season. It's not as if we're anticipating a blowout or rooting for a blowout. It's just the only thing that really makes it interesting. So that's why you're bringing this hypothetical, what if they were to, get beat 42-7. Now, Clemson hasn't done that to any good teams this year, so there's precious little reason to expect that. But if it were to happen, it certainly changes the dynamic. And one of the things that surprised me the most, I thought about Ward saying that, and I did have reason to believe that the committee was really strongly encouraged all of the individual members to do your homework now. Settle on what you believe about the order of that cluster of teams, the three-loss SEC teams and Miami. Now, you could include anyone else. You can include BYU or whoever else that you would deem would be in that group. But make your decisions, because they were very sensitive to the fact that switching it without the teams having played with no real great reason could be viewed negatively, and would be viewed negatively. There's one other thing that they're so high up the rankings, I can't conceive of it. But, if Georgia were to lose decisively to Texas, now look, I think Georgia should be in the playoff. I'm not saying that.
Sure. Yeah.
But then you bring into the equation, wait a second, now they're a 3-loss team, albeit one that lost in the championship game, who lost to two of the other 3-loss teams in the SEC. Yeah. So, there are still some things that would be evaluated in the event that a couple of the conference championship games weren't competitive. I mean, I think Georgia overall with the number one strength of schedule among the teams in the playoff mix is fine. But I'm just saying there will be a lot of fodder for people to jump on, regardless of how this all winds up.
Yeah. So my takeaway, Rece, is that Notre Dame virtually assured of a playoff game, right?
Oh
Like I
yeah,
don't think there's any
they're
variables.
a lock. Yeah,
Ohio State virtually assured of a playoff game because I don't think so. You to secure
a
home
home
play,
playoff
yeah,
game
home
is what
playoff
you're
games, yes,
saying.
home
Home
playoff game.
playoff
I'm
game,
sorry,
yes.
home playoff game,
Yeah.
yes. So Notre Dame obviously, can start with the five, and I see Kalen DeBoer is about to jump in and join us, but I don't think, yeah, I think if you're Ohio State, you're getting the shoe ready with some,
Hmm.
with some winterizers. For there, which is a pretty drastic turn from where they were Saturday afternoon.
Well, Alabama has won two of the last three SEC championship games, but I would say that probably most of the Alabama interest will be focused on Charlotte on Saturday night. And we are pleased to be joined now by the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Kalen DeBoer. So, Kalen, we unveiled tonight the rankings and saw that Alabama is the last team in. What was your reaction? What's your level of nerves as you were watching that unfold?
Yeah, you don't know. It's a hard decision that I understand the committee has to make. I totally get it. Trying to balance everything. There's so many really good teams in the country. Not just at the top, but throughout. And so, you don't know how it's going to come out, but certainly, please and understand, I guess, selfishly and from our end, where we feel we belong and feeling that we're one of those teams that certainly should be in the playoff. A little biased, of course, but I think just also stepping back and having some perspective, with our kind of season that we had and the teams we play, the wins we had in particular. I just really feel like we belong there, and we have that type of team that can go the distance, given this opportunity.
Given your path, Kalen, you're a pretty grounded guy. Does politicking come natural to you?
No, not really. Not really. I just, talking about our team and that does, because I'm proud of who we are, what we have become, and the journey we've had this year in particular. But talking about the strengths and the things that are a part of what our season, was as well in this particular situation is a little different. That's for sure.
Because of the brand power of Alabama and the visceral reaction that a lot of people have, it's already started up that people aren't focusing on the strengths, but instead on the weaknesses. And those are, in my judgment, fair critiques. How do you, I don't want to say explain away, but how do you balance your belief that you're among the 12 best teams and your accomplishments merit inclusion, balanced against particularly the performance against Oklahoma?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I get it. But I think there's also some things too when you look at just the SEC schedule. I mean, they're a quality bowl eligible team. You're playing on a road and environment. And I think, there's a different demeanor I think teams have when Alabama comes into town. And just again, going on the road. Again, one thing that's I think maybe not understood, and you can't use excuses because this happens throughout the season in different ways. But they were also coming off a bye week, and I know what that is for us when we come off of bye weeks, and that happened to us a couple different times this year, in particular, with us going on the road against teams who had that.
Kalen, for you, you come to Alabama, you scramble to put a roster together. So many key guys had left in the portal, and I imagine this past 10, 11 months has gone pretty quick since you played for the title. What would it mean to you if everything came together for you this weekend and you were able to get in this playoff? Just considering all the ups and downs of the season.
Yeah, it would be huge. Just I think for me, it's always about the guys that were loyal, that stayed true to being here at Alabama, made that commitment to this place, and then weathered everything that came their way. Stayed the course in the midst of the fire, I call it. And understandably so, because I mean, think about everything that was with Coach Saban and what they were expecting when they, chose to come here. But there's just so many seniors, upperclassmen, guys who had been in the program that just, hung in there. And our growth as a team, the resiliency I think we've shown in a lot of different ways, whether it's within a game or throughout the course of the year, coming back from, exactly what you just mentioned, a tough loss just a few weeks ago, and coming back and playing a rivalry game against a team that just had a good win themselves in Auburn. I think just seeing how we've come and what we've who we are, just probably more the chemistry and just that type of stuff too. Just means a lot for me because that's what my passion is bringing teams together in a special way. And I think we've really become that and set ourselves up if we get this opportunity to do something special because of the determination we all have.
It makes the hairs stand up on the necks of fans of other conferences. But you were in the Pac-12 prior to its demise. You were in the Big Ten as an assistant coach, and they hear the mantra of it just means more in the SEC. And you look at all of the strengths of schedule, and it's the vast majority SEC teams. And I know it's extraordinarily difficult for you to take a fully objective look at this, given your position now. But what's the difference in the SEC? Is there really a difference from the other places you've been?
Yeah, I think that you have top tier teams in every league, and I think just the depth of it. I think I saw something yesterday. If I remember exactly, I think there's maybe been 12 teams in our conference that have won games against top 25 teams. And that just shows the depth of the league. And that's what you're facing each and every week. And our schedule was one of the tougher ones not just in the conference, but in the country. And so that right there, the wear and tear physically in particular, because that's what this league prides themselves on. And that's why you see teams in our conference going the distance many times, winning a national championship, but also just the week in and week out grind. And when you go on the road, especially here in this league, those environments are different than any other. And I think that in itself right there is a tough piece to overcome.
Kalen, if this team gets in the bracket, can it win a national championship?
I really do. I think seeing what it looks like from teams, just last year in particular. And I think about the makeup, the DNA, you have to be physical, and we are that across the board, both sides. And everyone thinks offensive line, defensive line, but across the board, we're a physical team. We've become more and more physical as we've gained more depth on our roster and more experience with a lot of young guys that are on the field too, to complement the upperclassmen. I think there's explosiveness, ability to score with big plays, guys that can hit the home run in particular, also you got to add, Jalen Milroe and what he can do, just being an elite athlete, elite football player in a lot of ways, can throw it down the field, played a lot of big time games for us this year, has done it over the course of the last couple of years. His experience in big games matters. And then, I think you add that to, the other side of the ball and even the special teams, but the defensive side, being able to force turnovers. We had 27 this year, which is really, I think, number 1 or 2 in the country, tops in our conference for sure. And, special teams, we're a very balanced team in all ways. Our punting game, we have a weapon there, and our kicking game and just coverage units are all really on par. So I think we've weathered a lot of storms. I think that's what it's going to take when you talk about not just 2 rounds of playoffs, but up to 4, depending on if you get the first bye or not. And having been through playoffs, I know it's smaller college, but there's a different path and road that you're on in getting through, more than just 2 games. And I think we have that makeup.
A number of national championships at the NAIA level at Sioux Falls. You keep using the word weathered the storm, and weather might well be, assuming you get in, it's going to play a factor. How do you prepare for years, Kalen? All we've heard from the Big Ten, Notre Dame, well, if we could get those Southern teams up here, in the frozen tundras. Wait till they see what's in store for them then. How will you address and prep weather?
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those, right, at the smaller colleges you talk about, but I think I've seen that, when it gets to those moments and it's playoff games, I think that's, you're putting everything into it, and this is what you've worked so hard for, and so I think our makeup of our team is a physical football team. We have the ability to run the ball with different people. If it's one of those like real weather games, if it's cold alone. I mean, I've been surprised at how well teams have come face me in the past, and operated and managed, in those environments, and that's what I would expect from our guys. We have some guys that are pretty determined and I think mentally strong, and would be fine in that type of environment for sure.
I have two very hard questions. One
is when you found out you made the NAIA field and were getting your seating, how did you find out? And is there someone as handsome and as with good hair as Rece Davis who announced that field to you?
It was a much different situation, I can promise you that. So we were undefeated pretty much every year, so it wasn't near as kind of a crazy way that it is nowadays. So yeah, and we know we did not. The second question you asked there.
There's no NAIA Rece?
No, I don't think so. I didn't get to talk to them.
This is not NAIA hair. This is NFL level hair right here. I just let you guys know that for sure. Where will you watch the ACC championship game? How do you anticipate doing that?
I mean, I'll be more than likely at home. I think probably be up in the office here a little bit, doing a few things and stuff too. So in between here and there over the course of the day. So that's what we'll be doing for sure.
Will you text Rhett Lashley good luck?
Probably should do that, huh? Yeah.
You can. I think from basically what we've been talking about, Kalen, your best bet is to text him good luck or extremely, extremely, extremely bad luck. one of the two. Kalen, thanks for taking time. We appreciate it and wish you well on this. Congratulations on a great season and best of luck the rest of the way.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Back on the College Game Day podcast, Rece Davis and Pete Thamel. Pete, we just had a nice conversation with Kalen DeBoer, who, absent a Clemson victory in the ACC championship game, appears to be on his way to the college football playoff in his first year at Alabama. After we talked about earlier, Ward Manuel saying that cluster of teams and their order is set. But I want to, before we move past that, I've said publicly that I felt that Miami was probably the least objectionable team, but they've got gaping holes in their resume for sure. And depending on how far down the football judgment well you prefer to go, you could go back to the Virginia Tech and Cal games and say that they benefited from erroneous replay calls. Some would say that. Perhaps in football judgment, if you go that far down the well. So I'm not saying Miami is a slam dunk. I felt like probably with Cam Ward and with the Oklahoma game that I mentioned to Kalen that Alabama suffered, and maybe, the Kentucky loss for Ole Miss, that maybe, and the fact that South Carolina lost head-to-head to both, that maybe Miami was the least objectionable among that group. But I do think that the team that probably has the biggest beef is not Miami. It's probably Ole Miss, because, Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss's roster is equal to anybody else. They've had missteps just as Alabama has. They didn't have a margin of defeat like the one Alabama had at Oklahoma. How do you feel about the fact that, Miami is ahead of Ole Miss? Ole Miss sort of almost out of the mix here and out of the discussion and out of the consideration for that last spot, it seems.
Yeah, I think that was just sudden tonight, Rece. I guess I probably should have expected that order to be set and those teams to be eliminated, but I wasn't ready to be down to, essentially what, 14 for 12, right? Is where we is where we are. And with the elimination, if you will, of Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, it does sort of like freeze in a moment in time, like how they're going to be, how they're going to be remembered. Again,
when you dial into these teams' resumes, I really feel like my overwhelming emotion is they all had chances, right?
Absolutely.
They
No
all
doubt.
had plenty of chances.
Yeah.
So, and then you're, they're like, that's like the little cluster of misfit teams.
Mhm.
And they thought Alabama fit a little better than the others. Now, Alabama laid a dinosaur egg in Norman. They were
Yeah.
terrible that night, but
It's
they won
awful.
4 or 5 to close the season. So
Mhm.
and again, we can go through the whole NCAA tournament debate of does how you close matter, not matter, but at least
Yeah,
like
right.
the general closing snapshot was they played strong in league play, and obviously included in that was a really nice night in Baton Rouge when we were down there for game day. And yeah, I just think great argument for Ole Miss, right? Like
Yeah. I mean,
roster, lines, talent.
yeah.
They got the quarterback. No Trey Harris, I think, has been a little bit of a bugaboo for them all year. If he doesn't get hurt against LSU, they probably win that game, right? And
Mhm.
there doesn't seem to be a lot of optimism about him for for coming back at any point after he re-injured that groin. Trying to give it a go, you got to give him credit against Florida, and he re-aggravated it. So yeah, like I'm not gonna get convicted or defiant about Miami because look,
Mhm. Me either. Me
the
either, by the
yeah
way. I'm just saying,
the schedule and the wins are what they are. And
yeah,
also
it's not very good.
Miami just got gashed all season, right? That
Yeah.
defense got gashed all
Mhm.
season. Cal gashed them. Virginia Tech beat them up pretty good. Syracuse ran them roughshod. So, Cam Ward is wonderful on the eye test, but the other side of the
Mhm.
ball just kept getting mauled over and over and over. And at a certain point, I would sit there and watch Miami and be like, man, what happens if they play a top 10 type team,
Yeah.
who can really, who could really go against them.
One of the things, Pete, because people get upset when they hear, strength of schedule, and they start to believe that the strength of schedule is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, particularly as it relates to the SEC. That, because virtually all of the top ranked schedules belong to teams in the SEC. So you say, okay, well, how can that be? Is that what ensures that it's not like circular logic? Well, it's tougher to play in the SEC. So I got Marissa Dowling, our great researcher that we talk about all the time on this show about on this, and had her ask our analytics people what safeguards are in place to ensure that this is not susceptible to any type of conference bias or anything like that. And they took the safeguards and they're going with the average playoff teams, and some of it's because of the FPI, and some of it is based on how the college football playoff selection committee has ranked teams. So there are safeguards in place for that. So whatever you think of strength of schedule or strength of record, Alabama had a pretty significant edge on Miami, had a little bit of an edge on Ole Miss, and virtually no edge in that regard on South Carolina. And South Carolina might have even had they were basically the same there. But all of the metrics, the forward-looking metrics, everything else, when you use that body of work phrase, gave Alabama the edge. The thing for me that I couldn't get past or have a hard time getting past is why I'm not convicted that Alabama's the right choice or that there is a right choice is just what you're talking about. Because I laid out on our podcast a few weeks ago that because everybody says, well, yeah, but what about this? And what about this? That each person evaluating should say, what's important to me? And the number one thing on my list of criteria is, do you look the part, and how often did you look the part? Well, Alabama looked the part and then some at times.
Yeah.
But boy, when they didn't look the part against Oklahoma, to me, that performance was near disqualifying. Not that I think Oklahoma stinks or anything like that, but I thought it was close to disqualifying because of the time of year, the stakes, the fact that they didn't get in the end zone. Although I know I can see the cards and letters coming. I know the official blew the call. I know it could have changed momentum. It didn't, and it's fair to consider that and say it, but it didn't. They didn't get in. They didn't overcome that adversity. And it was a very bad performance. And I'm not trying to lobby against them, because there are things over the course of the season from game one until the finale and during rivalry Saturday that is in their favor, relative to the other teams. But you call them the island of misfit toys. I think it's a group of teams that has proven it can lose. And so you got to take one of them, unless that old Roy bus, the rest of y'all bus from Clemson, comes rolling up in there and steals that last spot. And that could very well happen on Saturday night.
Let's talk about the SMU case then, because as clear and linear as Ward Manuel was about, if you're out now, you're out now,
he left it wide open that SMU could fall when losing in a title game. David Hale pointed this out on Twitter, our colleague who covers the ACC for us today. He said that, when he said it, I was like, oh yeah. Remember the Caleb Williams year when they were pushing the playoff and lost to Utah when Caleb got hurt in the Pac-12 title game? They were punished and they fell out. And I think Ohio State came in, took that bid, and then ended up playing Georgia right until midnight there in Atlanta. I'll be curious because this is going to be precedent setting too. Like, not only would it be, does the ACC get a second bid and SEC get a fourth if SMU loses, but I think it would also, give you some insight into how the committee could end up reacting in the future too. Now the committee is going to change, different members, they think different, but the possibility of that happening at a time, Rece, quite frankly, when people are questioning the value of conference championships games to begin with, right?
Yep.
So I just think that, like, I think it's all very interesting, but I do think, like, if SMU loses 27-3, their resume is good, but it's flawed.
It's a lot like Miami's, which they said wasn't quite good enough.
Yes.
If they lose. And Ward did say this while he said those cluster of teams were set in their particular order, that the commissioners had charged the committee with evaluating the teams through the conference championship game. So you get there and, I think it's fair, especially when you haven't really faced a lot of the upper echelon teams in your conference, as SMU, hasn't, they didn't play Miami, haven't played Clemson yet. So if they come up short, it's fair to evaluate them. If they play well, I think they've got enough of a buffer to get there. You've brought up something really interesting, because there's going to come a point Sunday after everybody's finished screaming and wailing about, gnashing of teeth over inclusion, that you're going to start to get really excited about some of the matchups and some of the games. And, we just had Kalen DeBoer on, and it's not likely to finish this way because Penn State and Oregon are going to play each other. There's going to be some shuffling. If Oregon wins, then you evaluate the head-to-head of Penn State and Ohio State and all of those things. But at the moment, Alabama at Notre Dame, Tennessee at Ohio State, those are, and even Indiana, Indiana lost more games than anybody in the history of the sport between the hedges against a team that's won two of the last three national championships now. Those are pretty compelling matchups on campus and pretty good theater.
Where would game day be?
Oh, if it finishes like that, I don't think there's any question. I don't know which would go Friday and Saturday, but it'd be South Bend and Columbus. I mean,
sure,
it'd have to be. So I don't know which would be Friday and which would be Saturday, but that's where we would be.
And that would be pretty cool.
It's going to be, no matter how it comes out. If Clemson knocks Alabama out and it's, Clemson against somebody, if they don't get if Clemson gets in, they might get the 12th seed, because they're not, they're not ranked in the top 12 right now, be the 5th highest ranked conference champion, get the automatic bid. And they might wind up going to Notre Dame. And
that'd be pretty. We've seen some pretty good games in that matchup.
Yeah, we have. And we've had some great moments in there. And, or maybe they go to Penn State, or maybe Alabama goes to Penn State, or maybe, all of these matchups are fascinating. Or if Georgia wins the SEC, somebody's going to go to Texas. Who might that be? That might be, depending on how it falls, if Georgia wins it, that might be Alabama at Texas, or any of those matchups like that. I think it's the most interesting and compelling and fun thing about the 12-team playoff is having the games on campus. And if I have to buy some extra Patagonia and get some electric socks, well, so be it. We can adapt and overcome.
Let's roll. I mean, I want to win. I want one snow game in this playoff. Is that too much to ask for?
No, not too much. Pete Thamel, you do a lot of work. You sacrifice a lot. If you want a snow game,
I want a snow game.
Let's get a snow game. Back to wrap up the College Game Day podcast right after this. Back on the College Game Day podcast, Rece Davis and Pete Thamel. So, Pete, we've broken it down. It doesn't look like a lot can change. What do you anticipate will be the biggest change in the order of the rankings, whether that's an upset in a conference championship game, whether it's Oregon getting knocked off? What do you think will be the biggest impact on the final rankings once they arrive on Sunday?
So I don't think we're going to have a bid thief, and I know we're going to pick games later in the week here, but I don't think Clemson has shown me in a big game they have the mettle to come through. Just this particular Clemson team. They are good enough to mow down bad opposition, and they have just not shown the ability to overcome excellent competition. And I think SMU has been fairly consistently good this year, but better than anybody Clemson's beaten, quite frankly. So I now there is some big game DNA, first time moment stuff that's going to be interesting, and that's going to play in. This is a little different than Kevin Jennings playing in the Fenway Bowl last year, where he got the start in the AAC title game last year when he got the start. So it will be an interesting test for Rhett Lashley, who's an excellent young coach, to see how he can bring his team in and give them a big game aura when they don't really have a lot of big game experience.
Playing in the ACC for free. They're not giving them the media rights money forever, but they might take home that trophy on Saturday night from Charlotte. And it might be that once the final seeds are announced and the bracket is set, that 3 of those teams in the quarterfinals with byes will be new to their conference. Maybe 4 of the 5 that get automatic bids will be new to their conference if Arizona State is able to beat Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. And also, Iowa State, we haven't mentioned a lot. They're playing to get in their best season, first 10-win season, their best season, and maybe they break through and get into the college football playoff. It'll be fascinating theater this weekend. Back making picks later on this week on the College Game Day podcast. Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe to get every single episode or download wherever you prefer to get your podcast. For Pete, I'm Rece. We'll talk next time.